Today, we are having one of the most epic podcasts yet. We will be talking about the power of pivoting with Monica Ortega. Welcome to the Whole Person Podcast. I am your host, Evan Herrman, and today we get to talk to the amazing Monica Ortega about her new book called The Power of Pivoting. I don't know about you, but in my life, there have been many times where I didn't know what choice to make after what I had been hoping for fell apart. And so today, Monica, she is a professional on-camera host, speaker, actress from Holt, Michigan. She created the travel show Monica Goes back in 2014 to inspire others to break out of the comfort zone and go on adventures. So Monica, I want to welcome you to the Whole Person Podcast. Let's give Monica a round of applause.
Thank you so much. What an awesome intro.
Well, good. Well, Monica, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you so much for coming on today. And I'm so excited to be talking about your book and your life. So let's just jump right in and give our audience a little bit of a background about who you are and what you do.
Yeah. So I'm originally from Michigan. I hopped around moving, chasing entertainment careers in Nashville, Tennessee, and Los Angeles, California. And I really fell in love with hosting. And once I figured that out, I was like, okay, I have to do this for the rest of my life. And so I started my travel show back in 2014. I loved hiking. I was told to put together my dream show. And I quickly realized I was afraid of everything. So it turned into me facing my fears. A lot of the episodes are me like crying off of cliffs and all this stuff. But I really wanted to show people that if an everyday average person like me can do these things, anybody can, and really encourage them to push out of their comfort zone. And then obviously the pandemic hit, and my producer and myself ended up starting a podcast, Stumbling Forward, about the highs and lows of entrepreneurship. And it still had that sort of through line of facing your fears. And then the book idea came about, which I never planned on writing a book. And I realized we're all pivoting in this moment. And I had done it so many times in my life, in careers and relationship and all of these things, that a lot of people who maybe don't know how to deal with change, I thought, I can help with this. I've done this a lot in my life. So then the book came about. So now I'm just trying to balance them all and really bring them all forward to show people that facing your fears is worth the risk.
So you've talked about you've done this a lot in your life. And when we say a lot, specifically pivoting. And I know in my own life, there's been many moments, many painful moments that have caused me to have to move towards a different direction because the goal, the dream, the aspiration, the relationship, whatever it was that failed, that didn't work out, caused me to have to go to a different direction. And I think so many times we get focused on the failure and hurt and stay there versus pivoting and going in another direction. So what are some of the critical moments in your life that you reflected on in writing this book, and that kind of was the birthing process of these life lessons that you decided to write about?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a few definitely big ones in my life. I think the first big change in my life was high school to college, right? We all go through that transition, or high school to the real world, whatever it is. And I wasn't ready for it. And I got depressed and I didn't know how to deal with that. And so I'm very much like a to-do person. And I need to feel like I have some sort of control, even though none of us do. So I started putting together like a toolkit to get through depression. And then the biggest thing in my life was I was married, and it was a very emotionally abusive marriage. And when he finally told me that he'd been cheating the whole time, it was the first time in my life that I asked myself the question, oh, okay, well, what do I want my life to look like? I feel like up until that point, I had been just checking the boxes and living this sort of linear life, doing the things you're supposed to do. And when that blew up, it was the first time I said, okay, well, who do I want to be? What do I want to do? What does my ideal life look like? And how do I get there? And my goal is to help people ask these questions before their life blows up, to really get on that path of living a life that they love. And so I think that there's a lot of opportunity in change, even though it's really difficult. And I feel like the growth that most people have comes through those difficult times. So it's hard to always see the opportunity in the moment, but there is a lot of opportunity. There's something about a fresh start of going, okay, am I on the right track? Where do I want to go with this? And then actually putting those things into movement.
So you're talking about figuring out the type of person that you want to be. And I feel like that's an area that I struggled in so much in my life because there's this ideal version of who I wanted to be. And I don't want to say that man is unattainable, but it was very difficult, which then also, when I didn't see the changes to make me be like this ideal version of myself, I found myself getting upset, unable to change, couldn't grow because I created this idol of this perfect version of myself, which I think was pretty, if not unattainable, dang near close to it. And so, how do we go about learning how to be the person that we want to be or the type of person that we want to be without creating an idol of ourselves that end up hurting us?
Yeah, that's such an amazing point, because I think one of the worst things that we do to ourselves is beat ourselves up. Either we're behind on the timeline, we're not the person we thought we should be, we don't have the career we think we should have, and that doesn't help anything. So what I found worked for me was, I was never really into like the woo-woo stuff of vision boards and visualization, and 10 years in LA, I finally kind of saw the light a little. But
so what you're saying is you just kind of had like a heavenly moment.
yes. Well, I definitely had that with my faith and with church, and all of that came into play around the same time. So I think that there's a combination of both. But I think the problem people make is they create this big picture, right? They put together the vision board of all these perfect things, and then they just hope for the best and beat themselves up when they don't get it. So what I started doing was putting into practice day-to-day things. So I would write out, okay, if my ideal person runs marathons, but I'm 30 pounds overweight and can't run, how can I do that today? And I would work it back from the 10-year plan, the 5-year plan, into the day-to-day. So I'm going to get up and run a half a mile because my ideal person runs. And so the more you kind of put these things into practice, just as things that you do in your daily life, the closer you get on that path to becoming the person you want to be. And then checking in with yourself. I always say this, businesses do this every quarter. They check in to see, am I on the right track? Am I not? And they don't beat themselves up if they're not. It's just, this is working, this isn't working. And what's not working, you throw out and you double down on what is. And so you have to kind of remove that ego from yourself to go, okay, I'm on the right path. And that's great. And we always have to know too, that our ideal self is going to change and grow. And it's okay if we don't reach that person, because you should have that vision in your mind, but don't beat yourself up along the way for not getting there. As long as you're on the track and you like who you are and you like what you're doing, you're fine. You're going the right way, right? It's only when you go, I don't like who I am, I don't like my career, I don't like this relationship, that's the time you have to check in with yourself and go, okay, maybe there's room for a change here.
So there's a saying, and I'm probably going to like severely butcher it, but yeah, I'm not even going to say it because I'm going to butcher it. But what I'm envisioning in my mind is someone who wants to make a pivot, but then as soon as they're like, okay, this isn't working for me, whatever this is, and then they make the pivot, and then because so many options are available or they have so many dreams that they try to chase them all and reach nothing. How do you narrow down your focus first on what you want? And then the follow-up to that is, how do you stay focused on one thing so that you could go after it versus being distracted by so many others?
Oh, this is something I still struggle with on a daily basis. I mean, obviously I have a travel show and a podcast and a book and all these different things that to nobody else make sense, but to me do. So I found one, batch work, doing things ahead of time so that you have that space for yourself, but really just focusing on one at a time. So also because things can change, right? So I thought I would be an actor. Obviously I kept getting hosting jobs and then things changed and went that way. So you have to be open to wherever this road may take you. And it may not be the place you think it will, as long as you love what you're doing. But I think you have to step back and go, okay, I'm going to pick one at a time. I did it at the beginning of this year. I was like trying to do the book and the show, and I applied to get my real estate license. And I was like, this is too much. And so I stopped doing everything and said, okay, I'm only going to do the book. When the book is out, then I can change to this other thing. So it's really important to have that sort of balance, and having a balance with yourself and with your personal life, and like including all of those things, because for years I was in hustle mode and just had no social life, put everything into my business. And you really have to give yourself that space for your own sanity and mental health as well.
I need to rewind for 1 second here. You said something that really caught my attention. You went and got your real estate license?
Well, I signed up for the classes, and it turns out it's very difficult. It's like getting a law degree, and it was taking up so much time and just mental space. And I thought, I can't do this for an hour a day and then go try to switch into filming a travel show. Like, it was too much to balance. Gotcha. So once the book is out, that's the next plan. I thought I can focus on it a bit more.
Well, if you have any questions, let me know, because I am also a real estate agent and I did get my broker's license this year.
Oh, congratulations.
It was, but you're right though, because I was doing a lot of things. And when I decided to go study for my broker's test, I quit like 5 things just to focus on that. Like, I even quit selling real estate, like producing, so that I could solely focus on just studying for like a month and a half.
Yeah. And I want to bring up something about that too, because I had a really hard time when the pandemic started and my travel show stopped. I wanted to hustle. I wanted to go live. I wanted to do all these things. And a friend of mine asked me, how would you feel if you stopped? And I said, oh my gosh, I'd be relieved. I've been hustling for so long. I would be relieved. And he said, pausing isn't quitting. And I think so often we think, if I choose this one thing and push everything aside, I'm going to lose it all. And it's like, no. You can do one thing at a time and come back to that. And people will still be there. Maybe different people, maybe more or less, but pausing isn't quitting. So don't beat yourself up for switching and going a certain way. It goes back to that, like, we beat ourselves up, right?
Sorry, I just had to go mind explosion here. That's a truth bomb right there. Pausing isn't quitting.
Yeah.
That was so good, because I think so many times that we feel like we have to do everything at once. And if we don't slow down enough, then we won't be able to get anything done.
Yeah.
But being able to pause different things at different times in our life and then pick things up, then we can keep the ball moving forward without feeling stressed. Like you were saying. That was so good.
A lot of times when people make a pivot or make a career change, they think, I'm giving up everything I've ever done, or they feel like they're failing, instead of just seeing it as an opportunity and being curious about where it takes you. I know a lot of friends that were actors, and then they thought, well, if I go this way and get this job, then I guess I'm done acting. It's like, that may come back to your life in a different way. That's happened to me many times. I, lived in Nashville to sing music, moved to LA to act, and was like, I guess I'm done with music, and then ended up in a bunch of bands. So you don't know how it might come back to you. So don't ever feel like walking away from something that's it. It's final. I'll never do it again in my life.
That's interesting. So through that process, because I'm sure that happened to you, tell me about a moment where you decided, I'm giving this up and not going to do it, and then coming back to it later, because I've 100% been there. And it's almost painful realizing, like, you know what, I'm going to give something up. So for me, it was this idea of being in ministry. I wanted to be a vocational minister, and it wasn't happening. So I gave up on it. I stopped pursuing it. And now I'm starting to see potentials of things working in that direction. And so talk about that moment of giving up versus pausing versus pivoting somewhere else and the doors opening. Because sometimes when the doors open again, you're like, oh no, I gave that up already. Mm-hmm. So walk us through that process.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to say, I think what you are doing with this podcast is ministering in a different way. And so that's part of like the being curious to the different opportunities, because it may not look how you think it does of Sunday morning, I'm speaking in church and this is what's happening, but you're still spreading the word of God, right? So like it can look a lot of different ways to people. And I think sometimes we miss that because we think it should look a certain way, right? But I definitely did that. Even I just moved to Denver in September. And I thought, okay, well, I've met this guy, we're ready to settle down and get a house. And so we moved to Denver, and I thought, I guess I'm done with acting. And, that's fine. That part of my life is over. Well, about a month after being here, I thought, let's just see if there's agencies out here. And I did 4 commercials this month. So there's still like ways that it can come up, even if you don't plan on it. But I struggle with it in my big vision as well, because people say, you know, what do you want to do? And I'm like, well, I want to be a travel host. I want to speak at events. I want to have this book, da, 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 da. I think all things are possible, just not all things at the same time. Right. So we have to realize that going one way doesn't mean you'll never get the other stuff. It just means this is my moment right now. And then those other things, if they're meant to be, they'll come back in a certain way at the perfect time. So trying to force it in a time that's not right doesn't help either.
You know, what you're saying reminds me of a moment that I had with God in a snow cone shack when I was in college, giving out snow cones for a job. And it was often very alone and isolated because the snow cone shack was parked in a park that specifically was geared towards like people working out. So like that just wasn't the best location. And I just remember saying, God, you know, I want to be an author. I want to be a speaker. I want to travel. I want to, you know, do all these things. And I said, just tell me, which one do you want me to do for a job? Like, just tell me and I'll go after that one. And I'm thinking like very narrow-minded here. Mm-hmm. I want a job. I want a vocation and I'll just go do that. So tell me. And what I felt God say is that, Evan, what I want you to do is going to look different at different stages of your life, but they're all going to have the same underlying theme, which is living out the heart of God by loving others back to life. And it was at that moment that I realized, you know, there are things that I'll be doing differently. You know, right now it's podcast or real estate or ministry or, you know, whatever those things might be. But the underlying theme is supposed to be in all those areas, living out the heart of God by loving others back to life. And so for me, I had a very holy moment where the Almighty spoke to me and I had this awesome revelation, but not a lot of people get to go through what I had in that experience. So for someone who's trying to figure out what their purpose is, their underlying theme, what advice would you give someone to help them walk through that process? Because as of right now, you know, mine was like a little nugget drop, you know, so I didn't go through that process, at least that I think of.
Yeah, I think, again, I think being curious and trying different stuff, because our gut will always tell us when something's wrong, right? It doesn't always tell us when things are right, but we definitely know when we're going on the wrong path. And again, I think doing that
real quick, because that was amazing.
Yeah, our guts know when we're going the wrong way, for sure. We don't always get that sense when we're going the right way, but we definitely know when we're going the wrong way. So sometimes no answer is the answer. It's like God going, just keep going. I'll let you know. You know, it's that whole thing of like, he only shows you a little bit at a time, right? It's all going to make sense down the road. But I always, this is not any sort of biblical reference. I have no experience in this, so I'm only speaking to how I refer to it. But I always say, I see God as like a choose your own adventure kind of thing, where I joke that I wasn't born and God was like, that one, she has divorce written all over her. You know, it was more like, okay, not what I would have picked for you, but I'll put some lessons in there and you'll get there in the long run. So the end destination is the same. It's just the choices we make along the way that depend on how quickly we get there, right?
Right.
So there is no wrong way. Taking a choice and going this way, you'll find out really quick if it's wrong. The only thing that's wrong is when your gut is telling you it and you keep pushing through anyway. But as long as you can be open to those moments of, this isn't it, try something else, and don't beat yourself up for feeling like I'm failing. No, that didn't work. I'm now getting closer to the person I'm supposed to be. And then practical things you can do. Like I said, I do a visualization where I picture my ideal day from the moment I get up. What does my bed look like? What does my room smell like? Who am I with? Do I have kids? Am I in a city? Am I in a country? I go through it all. And then I open my eyes.
Let's do this. All right. I'm going to play a little music here and you're going to take me to what you practice when you do that. Okay.
Okay.
Go.
All right. So I open my eyes. I see my partner next to me in bed. It's a beautiful white, bright room in like a farmhouse. And then I get up, I go for a run, come back. By that point, my husband is taking care of my daughter, waking her up. My assistant comes over a little bit later to help me figure out my plan for speaking and the book signing. I go through it all, right? Moment by moment. And then I open my eyes, I write out exactly what I saw. And then I start figuring out, how do I practically get to this point, right? So if you're single and you see that husband and kids, okay, so a year from now, I want to be in a relationship. So a month from now, I want to be starting to date somebody. How do I start dating? Like, you break it down so small. Like I said, the marathon thing. If I'm running a marathon in that vision, I'm going to run a half a mile. And you start making these things your daily practice. And then you're on the path to becoming that person and living that life. It may not come out that way and things may change along the way, but continuing to check in with yourself to see, do you still want these things? Is that the vision you see? So I found a way to kind of combine the woo-woo stuff of the meditation and visualization and vision boards, but then create a plan, because I am a to-do person. I'm a type A and I need like practical things. And that's, I started doing that a couple of years ago, and I feel like I'm pretty much right on track of the things that I wanted. And some of it's changed because, like I said, I didn't expect a book. And so then, all right, well, let's sit down and figure out how that looks in the vision.
Right. So. No, what you're saying reminds me of a quote that I heard a long time ago: what you focus on expands. Mm-hmm. And so oftentimes we focus on the negativity, on the things that aren't going well, and the pain, the COVID. I mean, here's a perfect example, okay? After the election, I just decided, you know what? I've listened to the news for like 4 years, and it was nothing but depressing.
Yeah.
So after inauguration this year, I just decided I'm turning off all news. And I can tell you, I don't know anything that's going on in the world right now. But as a person, I am much more happier than I've ever been.
That's great.
And because I'm not focused on what other things are going on in the world or all the negative influences that people are trying to make me care about, that I need to focus on my life and what I'm doing. And so how does someone put aside the negative focuses and regroup themselves to plan out their goals, their dreams, and their visions?
Yeah, I think, first of all, taking it all on yourself, right? Because you can't blame other people. If people around you are negative, or you have a negative situation, or there's barriers, you have to let that stuff go, because you can only be accountable for yourself, right? And like you were saying with the news, I did the same thing. So like during the pandemic, I was like watching the White House briefings and, every news outlet. And then I realized I like the morning news. I call it decaf news. I get the headlines with a little bit of fluff, and then I'm good. And I go about my day, because I figure if something happens where I need to be informed, people will let me know, right? So it is difficult to kind of block out that negativity, but really just focusing on the things that you can control, I think, is the best way. And then if other people are being negative, remove yourself from the situation. Don't give into that. And even if it's people close to you, just be like, all right, I'm going to take an hour and go do something for myself. So just always being self-aware, and stop putting the blame on the world or your partner or your parents, and just going, okay, well, what can I do about my mood?
Right. A lot of that, like you're saying, comes down to personal responsibility, mm-hmm. and choosing and following through with it. So let's take this one step further, because we've talked a lot of practical applications. So I want to use a scenario in my life, and I want you to coach me. Okay? So right now, I feel like there's a lot of opportunities in my life that I've always wanted, and they haven't manifested. They haven't opened themselves up to me. And now, where I'm sitting, all of them are opening up to me at once. So how do I go through this process? Like, okay, this is everything I've ever kind of wanted. And while I wanted it at different times, things are coming to me all at once. So how do I go about choosing when everything that I've wanted is happening at once? How do I put things down that I've always wanted to do?
Yeah. Okay. Few questions.
Yeah.
What areas, like what things are coming into your life?
Perfect. So ministry is one of them. Mm-hmm. I got my broker associate license, so working towards opening up a real estate brokerage. As you know, we're already doing the podcast, but growing and expanding that even more, even with YouTube. And then, there's a local charity that I'm, have an offer to be on the board. And, I really, that's one of my favorite nonprofits. And so I really want to do that as well. And I still want to write a book.
Okay. And what is your big overall dream goal?
My big overall dream goal is to speak, teach, write, have influence. And those are things that I'm specifically doing. And that's how I'm answering that question. Write books and travel. Like that's what I want to do.
So right off the bat, and obviously only you can answer these things because it's your gut, right? But nothing in the big goal said real estate to me. Is that more of a money thing?
That's more of a money thing, yeah. But it's funny because as I was saying that, and then after I stopped, I was just like, I never said real estate.
Yeah, which is okay because that can be something, you have your license. It can be something great. This is my fallback, right? But if you have these opportunities coming in these other areas, it might be time to lean into those, right? Now, if there's no opportunities coming in your dream stuff, then yes, you have to figure out the practical aspect of it and know that the dream will come down the road. But if you have these other things coming that financially can get you through, I would say lean into those. And I would say the nonprofit
really open yet. Like there's no money in anything that I'm talking about yet. And the money in real estate. So it's one of those things. It's like, real estate is the way I pay for the podcast. Real estate is the way I do the marketing. And so it's one of those things I can't get rid of because this isn't yet making money.
Yeah, totally get that. I feel that with my travel show in my core. I would say, can you still do the real estate stuff without opening your own brokerage, without like expanding on it? Use it as a way to still be making money, but then leading into these other things that you can do.
I'm sure I could. Yeah.
Yeah. So that might be a way to go about it so that you can, and I would say with ministry, I think you are doing that with the podcast. And I think you would be doing that in the nonprofit. So that could be something that is coming in different ways and not necessarily ministry or this. Obviously this is something, for you to talk about with God and figure out what your path is, and you only know in your gut. So I'm just going off of like a completely unbiased, third person here. But so I would say continue to have those conversations and write those things out. But yeah, I would go through the process of what does my dream self look like? Am I working at that nonprofit? Am I not? Did the nonprofit lead me somewhere? Is the podcast still going in my dream version, or was that a way to get the book deal? So kind of looking at the path that you want to go will help you decide which one to do first.
Interesting. Okay.
Just my thoughts.
So, you have a travel show. You decided to write a book. When you're doing one thing, how did you lead yourself into choosing to do another?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because I tried to go for a traditional publisher and they were like, this doesn't make sense. You have a travel show and this is a book about like your divorce and pivoting. But in my mind, they do connect because they are pushing out of your comfort zone and creating a life you love, right? But the book I never planned on writing. I always thought someday I wanted to tell people the kind of stories that I've learned along the way, but I thought I'm in the middle of the journey. But then I realized my middle might be somebody else's beginning. And so I thought, well, let me just sit down and start writing. And it was like 3 weeks later, I had the book. Like I thought, I guess I did have some stuff to say.
3 weeks?
Yeah, it was about 3 weeks, which is wild. I mean, what?
I said, how thick is this book?
It's not the thickest book. It's 174 pages. That's it behind me. But
I see that. That's still a good sized book.
Yeah, it was about 30,000 words. But yeah, I just realized I learned a lot. I'm a voracious reader. I love self-help books. I love, all of that self-growth stuff. So I think I picked up a lot from those, and it was just combining them to see what worked for me and then hopefully helping other people. But yeah, I never planned on writing it. And then I thought, if this can be my story, but for other people, because I didn't want this to be a book about me. It's just the lessons I've learned that hopefully can help other people navigate the changes in their life and see them as opportunities. So once I realized that there was like a bigger purpose to it, I was all in. I was like, I have to get this book out. And it was interesting because I had, some friends and family that were like, one, this has nothing to do with your travel. Two, this is very personal. But I'm like, if it can help one person, then in my mind, it's worth it.
Right. So the reason why the publisher didn't like the idea and your friends were like, I don't get this. It's because there were two separate styles.
Yeah, it was a combination of that. And then the fact that I'm not a celebrity. So they were like, people don't really read nonfiction books from people that aren't famous. And I was like, well, okay. But again, if it can help that one person, that's amazing. And that's the goal in the long run.
Do you know who William Paul Young is by chance? Or the book The Shack?
Oh, yeah. Oh, God, I love that book.
Okay. So William Paul Young is the author of The Shack. And he was signing books here in Tulsa one time. And I didn't even know like he was signing, but I walked in and there he was. And I'm like, oh, let me go get my book. So I drove back to campus, got my book. Golly, this is like 15 years ago though. And he's signing it. And in the book he wrote, because I wanted to write, and he wrote, write each book as a gift.
I love that.
And it just made me, he was sharing with me how he never meant for the book to be a bestseller. He never meant for it to get published. He had family members that were going through some things and they didn't know how to talk to God about it. And so he wrote the book based off of how to help his family. And out of that gift came everything else.
Yeah.
Where I tend to start like, I want the bestseller. So what do I have to do that? And I think sometimes I think sometimes we also set ourselves up for disappointment because we take that scenario. If I write, I want to be a bestseller. What are the chances of a no-name author like myself being able to become a bestseller like that? Like minute, like minute. So how do we pursue our goals without setting ourselves up for failure? Or I don't want to say overreaching, but I feel like sometimes we can try to overreach or overdream. And when we come short of that hurt, that pain, that failure turns into quitting.
It's interesting that you say that because I feel like I suffer from the opposite effect where I'm like, just one person would be great. And people are like, you should probably dream a little bit bigger than that. But I think it's really checking in and also building yourself up, right? There is this sort of like, especially in entrepreneur land or as a writer or as a creative, we're really hard on ourselves and we take things really personally because it's our soul in these things. It's not just a brick and mortar. This is a product. So I'm a big fan of building yourself up. And like, I literally have written myself a letter, like, you are freaking amazing. You've done this, this, and this, and reminding yourself of the things that you've done and literally having it written out, everything you've done that you have been successful at. So when you have those moments of feeling like I didn't hit this goal, I'm a failure, you can look at where you started, where you are now, and everything that happened along the way. And also know that the journey's not over yet. It doesn't mean that 10 years from now, somebody doesn't pick it up and it becomes a bestseller. Like, you just don't know. So instead of focusing on all the things that aren't happening yet, focus on how far you've come and the amount of things that you've already done. And I feel like writing it out and making a list of those things helps because it's easy to be like, yeah, I guess I've done some stuff. But when you see it in writing and you're like, oh my gosh, I've done 20 commercials and I wrote a book and I did this. And you're like, I'm kind of awesome, and like having those to switch it.
Well, and that goes back to what we were saying, you can pursue different things at different times and pause, but you don't have to do everything all at once because then nothing will happen. It actually reminds me of one of my favorite quotes. Do you know who Ron Swanson is?
Sounds so familiar.
Parks and Rec.
Yeah.
You ready for this? This is my favorite quote.
Okay.
Half-ass two things. Whole-ass one thing.
Love it.
Yeah, it's so true though.
Yeah.
And so in this spot of learning not to overreach, but finding that middle ground, what would you say would be the most important lesson that you've learned in motivating yourself to reach forward?
I think I've learned that the journey's not done yet. And so just because I don't see it yet doesn't mean it's not going to happen. And I think that helps me keep reaching forward without beating myself up for not being at certain places, because I know they're going to happen. I don't know when. I might be 85 and get that thing, but like knowing that it's coming and just being patient and trusting that it's in God's timing has helped me a lot to just enjoy the journey. I allow myself to be curious now. I'm a lot less anxious. I had anxiety for the longest time because I had to make the right choice and I couldn't make a wrong choice. And, especially after my divorce, it was like, you made one horrible choice. You don't know how to make choices. And then you have to just be easy on yourself and go, you know what? I'm going to try it and just see. And I'm not dead, so we're doing okay.
I think you brought up a great point. A lot of us sometimes will get anxiety when it comes to making choices. Mm-hmm. Having to pivot because we're afraid to make the wrong one. What was that process like, overcoming anxiety for you in your ability to make decisions?
Yeah, it's a big thing I talk about in the book too. The way that I made the depression mental health toolkit, I made an anxiety toolkit. And so I like having these things written out. So when I start feeling my brain spiraling, I can pick one and see if it works. And if it doesn't, I can pick something else and see if it works. So it kind of goes back to that being practical, right? Writing down the list of things you've been successful at, in the same way, catching yourself in those lies. So if your brain starts telling you, I'm a failure, I'm never successful at anything, you can actually write out, I've done this, this, and this. So that's not true. And if I can't do it myself, I call a friend. I call my best friend and I'm like, hey, my brain is telling me that I'll be single forever. And she'll be like, no, because you go on dates all the time and you do this or whatever it is. Like, catching yourself in those lies can help prevent that spiral, because our brains tell us all sorts of stuff and we pick and choose what we latch onto. So that was a big part of it. And a really great thing, actually, my therapist had me do this for relationships, but it applies to everything. She said, after your divorce, you're not going to trust yourself that you can make a decision. So write out the non-negotiable things in somebody, and then don't even go after somebody that doesn't hit these, right? If they're not Christian, if they don't want kids, like, just stop it. It doesn't matter if they're a great human and you had a good time. If they don't hit it, bye. And it'll get you close to your goals. So I do the same thing with my life in general. If it doesn't hit my non-negotiables of moving me forward, inspiring me, feeling like I'm on the right track, it's not right. And that's okay. And that helps me figure out my decisions a lot faster than just being in my head going, I don't know, I guess I'll try it. Feeling like, okay, these are my goals. Is this leading me toward them or away? Is this thought serving me or not?
That's awesome, because you've set up a tool to make decisions by, to make decisions by a life mission, or in this case, in relationships, things that you want in a relationship. So we can apply that, like you were saying, towards careers. If, nail out 3 or 4 things that you want in a career. And if it doesn't match those, go find one that does, or don't choose that one. And I think sometimes, like you were saying, we make the wrong decision because we don't know, we haven't taken the time to make that list. And oftentimes, so like for me, when I first got into the workforce, I worked for a lot of bad bosses, but I just accepted the first opportunity because it's money, I need the job. But I didn't take time to look at the red flags. I didn't take the time to look at the character of the boss or how his employees were quitting left or right. I had one boss where I worked for her for 2 or 3 months. And then at the very end, I found out she had 21 people in my position in 9 months before me. And I was like, oh, you're kind of bad at this.
It's funny, right? We look at red flags in people, but we don't look at them in other aspects of our life. And we have this scarcity mindset. I've talked to friends about this where they're like, I can't quit this job. Nothing else will come along. It's like, you wouldn't stay in a relationship like that. He's terrible to me, but there's nobody else out there. Some people do, but that scarcity mindset of this is my one and only shot, so I have to stick with it no matter how miserable it makes me. I think that is the thing that's hurting people more than anything, feeling like they can't make a change. And if you're miserable and it comes out in other ways. I know if I'm in a bad workplace, if I'm going home and I'm road raging on the way, I'm like, this is not me. It comes out in other ways, or you get sick, but we know that. And going in, a lot of these jobs you talk about, if you're on your list is, I want to travel, and your job only gives you 1 week of travel a year and you cannot take any other time off, maybe don't take that job. It doesn't play into your values. If they don't have maternity leave and you want kids, like start looking at your actual values for your life, and don't be afraid to walk away from jobs, careers, relationships, people, anything that is taking you away from those goals.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I like to end each show with the same 3 questions. And I'm actually going to probably throw in a 4th one here for you, which I'll kick it off with. When I watched your videos, and as we've talked, you really enjoy life. Like, I feel like that's apparent. If I'm wrong, just tell me. Like, no, I hate my life. What would you say was one of the biggest contributing factors to you enjoying your life?
Yeah, I think 2 things. One, facing my fears, because it took me out of my brain and my anxiety, because you can't think about anything else when you're ripping onto a cliff. So that helped. But also, like I said, after my divorce, I felt like, okay, I only get one life. What do I want it to look like? And then every day from then on, I have made a choice that I like. And so I feel like the first 34 years of my life, I was playing small. I was kind of asleep for a lot of those years. And now I genuinely love every single day because I know I'm doing exactly what I want to be doing that day.
Okay. So here's the other question. In terms of negative self-talk, what thing are you currently saying to yourself that you struggle with?
Ooh. Well, for me, a big part of it is my weight. I struggle with that. It's like, I just lost some weight and then I thought, well, we'll see for how long. Like that's my negative self-talk is I just can't seem to see that part of myself yet. So I'm really working on that and being like, no, I'm still on the journey. Like, of course there's more to go. Like I got this. I know what to do. But that's something that I struggle with daily. And then also the biggest thing in my life that I struggled with was telling myself I couldn't have a relationship and a career. So as my career would take off, I would sabotage relationships. As the relationship went well, I would sabotage my career. And so for the first time in my life, I'm trying to visualize both and see that I can have both. And I do finally see that, which is really exciting.
That's awesome. What brings you peace?
Nature. Yeah, being out on hikes. To me, I went to nature before I went to church. And that was where I connected with God. That's where I felt there's something about realizing how small you are in a big world and all of the amazing things that he does that lets you go, okay, it's all good. We got this.
Last question. What's the best decision you've ever made?
To love myself, to play big and to start going for the things that I wanted and not feel like I had to choose.
I would say that is probably one of the biggest life lessons I learned last year too, is to learn how to love myself, because it was in that moment that when I started to learn how to love myself, everything in my life started changing for the better.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
awesome.
Now I'm more thankful to God than instead of asking him for stuff. I'm like, man, this is great. So, yeah.
So where can people follow you? How can people connect with you and find you?
Yeah, so everything is on the website, monicagoes.com, and that includes the book. The book is available on Amazon or my website. And then on social media, I'm at Monica Goes Show or at Power of Pivoting.
Perfect. And you also mentioned that you had something for anxiety and depression. Talk about that and where people can find that.
Yeah, that's actually in the book. I'm probably going to offer it as a free PDF download as well once I get my website officially set up for that. But it's in the book. I believe it's chapter 4 when I go through mental health. And it's like a breakdown of creating a list for depression and creating a list for anxiety. But it's really basic. I mean, I want your listeners to just have that knowing as well. And that's just start thinking about the things that work for you and write them down. And then try them out the next time you start to feel those things and see what works and what doesn't. And eventually you'll build out this toolkit that you can use that can help. It's not a guarantee, but it can help to get ahead of that spiral.
Absolutely. Monica, thank you so much for coming on to the show today and sharing your book, your life, and your wisdom with us. I'm so grateful that you came on.
Thank you so much. This was amazing.
Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.